It was a quiet night, the kind of night where everything feels calm and still. The streets were silent, and the world seemed to be resting. But in the middle of that peaceful silence, something unexpected broke through. The sharp sound of an ambulance siren cut across the quiet air, making people look around in confusion. No one knew what was happening, but it was clear that someone, somewhere, needed help fast. Tonight was not an ordinary night. Tonight was a night that would take a surprising turn in the life of Marvin Winans. While the world slept, his life was suddenly pulled into a storm he didn't see coming. And in that fast-moving ambulance, a story was beginning, one that no one could have predicted. Earlier that evening, Marvin had been fully focused on his rehearsal. It was a normal day for him, filled with music, practice, and dedication. He was surrounded by people who admired his energy and passion. Everything was running smoothly until, all of a sudden, his expression changed. He paused, placed his hand on the table for support, and took a slow breath. At first, everyone thought he was just tired from the long practice, but within seconds, the situation became serious. Marvin's face lost color, his body felt weak, and before anyone could fully understand what was happening, he collapsed. Panic spread through the room as people rushed toward him, calling his name and trying to help. Someone dialed emergency services immediately. No one had ever seen him like this before, and the fear in the room was heavy. Something was clearly wrong, and time was running. The ambulance doors shut quickly, and the paramedics moved fast. Inside, the small space was filled with urgent voices and the steady beeping of medical machines. Marvin lay on the stretcher, breathing unevenly, while the paramedics worked to keep him stable. One of them checked his blood pressure and shook his head with concern. Another placed an oxygen mask gently over Marvin's face, trying to help him breathe more comfortably. They kept talking to him, encouraging him to stay awake, telling him they were right there with him. Even though their voices were calm, the tension in the ambulance was strong. Every second felt important. No one knew what had caused his sudden collapse, and the answers were still hidden. All they could do now was keep fighting to make sure he stayed conscious until they reached the hospital. As soon as the ambulance arrived at the hospital, the doors flew open and the medical team rushed forward. In a matter of seconds, Marvin was lifted out and taken inside, surrounded by doctors and nurses who were moving with purpose and speed. They spoke in short, focused sentences as they checked his vitals and prepared him for tests. The bright hospital lights and quick footsteps filled the hallway with a sense of urgency. Marvin, still drifting in and out of awareness, managed to whisper something soft, a small sentence that only the nurse beside him heard. "I'm not done yet." It was a simple line, but it carried a deep feeling like he was fighting from within, refusing to give up. The medical team continued their work, hoping they could figure out what had gone wrong before his condition became worse. Inside the examination room, doctors studied the first set of results, but nothing was clear. His blood pressure was unusual, his heartbeat had moments of irregularity, and his body showed signs of exhaustion, yet no specific cause stood out. They ran more tests, checked for anything that might point to an answer, but every result only added more confusion. The doctors looked at each other with concern, realizing this wasn't a simple case of tiredness or stress. Something deeper was happening, and they needed time to uncover it. Outside the room, the silence felt heavy. Everyone waited for answers, but the truth was that no one had them yet. The uncertainty made the situation even more frightening. Anyone knew Marvin's condition needed close attention, and the night ahead was going to be a hard one. While Marvin lay unconscious, memories of the past few weeks painted a clearer picture. He had been working nonstop, long rehearsals, late-night planning, constant travel, and never allowing himself enough rest. People around him had gently warned him to slow down, to take breaks, to care for his health, but Marvin always brushed it aside. He believed he could handle everything. He believed pushing forward was the only way. Those moments now played like soft flashes in his mind, missed meals, sleepless nights, pushing through headaches, and telling himself he was fine. It was as if his body had been trying to speak to him all along, and tonight it finally spoke in the strongest way possible. These flashbacks showed how much pressure he had carried without realizing how deeply it was affecting him. Inside the emergency room, the atmosphere shifted from fast-paced action to deep concentration. The doctors gathered around Marvin, their eyes scanning every monitor and every reading that appeared on the screens. The room felt heavy with seriousness. The steady, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound cutting through the silence. It was a reminder that his condition was still unstable, and no one yet understood why. One doctor took his blood pressure again, watching the numbers rise and fall in ways that didn't make sense. Another doctor checked his heartbeat, listening carefully through the stethoscope with a focused expression. Their faces showed confusion, because nothing was adding up in a clear, straightforward way. His pulse was unusual, not dangerously low, but not where it should be. His breathing was shallow, but not alarming enough to explain everything. His skin was cold, yet there were no signs of infection. Everything looked like small pieces of different puzzles, none of which matched each other. A nurse recorded every detail on a clipboard, quietly noting the changes. Another nurse prepared different machines for further tests, sliding trays of equipment closer to the doctors. They were working with calm urgency, the kind where every movement has meaning, but no one panics. The room was bright, but the air inside felt tense, like everyone was waiting for a sign, some kind of clue that would make everything clear. The doctors ran blood tests, heart scans, and oxygen level checks. They tested for dehydration, overexhaustion, and even rare issues that normally wouldn't be considered so early. But every result came back unclear. Nothing showed a specific cause. One doctor removed his glasses and rubbed his forehead, trying to piece together the puzzle. "His body's reacting to something," he said quietly, "but we don't know what yet." It wasn't the kind of sentence anyone wanted to hear. Not the staff, and certainly not the people waiting outside. Meanwhile, Marvin lay completely still, unaware of the discussion happening just feet away. The soft rise and fall of his chest was the only sign that he was still fighting. Every few minutes, a nurse would gently adjust his blanket or check his IV line, making sure he was stable and comfortable. The weight of uncertainty filled the room because not knowing the cause meant not knowing how to treat it. Another hour passed, and the doctors gathered again to review all the charts. They compared test results, exchanged theories, and discussed possibilities. Exhaustion? Maybe. Stress? Highly likely. Overwork? Very possible. But none of these alone explained the collapse. It was as if his body had been silently carrying a heavy burden for weeks or even months, and finally reached a point where it could no longer keep up. Outside the room, the lights in the hallway glowed softly. Nurses walked past, families waited in chairs, and the world continued moving, but inside Marvin's room, time felt frozen. The search for answers continued, yet the mystery remained. What had pushed him to this point? What was his body trying to warn him about? The doctors finally agreed on one thing. They had to monitor him closely through the night. More tests would follow, more signs would appear. But for now, the truth was simple. His body had reached a breaking point, and the cause behind it was still hidden in the shadows. When his family arrived at the hospital, their faces showed the weight of fear and worry. They hurried through the hallways, searching for any sign of good news. One of them held his hand as he lay in the hospital bed, their voice soft and shaking. They whispered reassuring words, telling him he was strong and that he would make it through this challenge. Another family member silently wiped away tears, trying to stay strong for everyone else. No matter how busy life had become, moments like these reminded them how much Marvin meant to them. They prayed quietly, hoping for a miracle, hoping for strength, and hoping that the doctors would come out soon with better news. The room was filled with love, fear, and hope all at once. That night felt longer than any night before. The doctors monitored Marvin closely, checking every reading, adjusting treatments, and making sure his condition did not get worse. Every hour mattered. His heart rate rose and fell throughout the night, keeping the medical team on high alert. The quiet hum of machines filled the room, marking every second. Outside, his family sat together, barely speaking, each lost in their own thoughts and prayers. The night tested everyone's strength. It was a night where the future felt uncertain, where every moment held both fear and hope. And deep inside, Marvin's body was fighting its own silent battle, trying to hold on, trying to make it through until morning. When morning came, the hallway lights slowly brightened, and tired faces looked up as the doctor finally stepped out of Marvin's room. The doctor's expression softened, and he gave a slow, reassuring nod. Marvin was stable. His condition had improved, and although he was not fully out of danger the night before, he had pushed through. The family let out breaths they had been holding for hours. Relief washed over them. The doctor explained that Marvin would need rest, real rest, and time to heal. His body had been pushed too far, and now recovery had to become the priority. After a long, frightening night, the darkness had finally lifted. When Marvin finally opened his eyes, he felt weak but grateful. He remembered the moments before he collapsed, the exhaustion he had ignored, and the fear he had seen on the faces around him. Lying in that hospital bed, he understood something important. He had to take care of himself before anything else. Life had forced him to pause, to slow down, and to rethink the path he had been walking. He whispered to his family that he would change his routine, that he would rest more, and that he wouldn't ignore his health again. It was a promise to himself and to the people who loved him. Sometimes life stops us, not to break us, but to save us. And for Marvin, this night became a lesson he would never forget.